Jeff.
Jeff.
But also Jeff.
Jeff. Jeefrey.
Damn it! So good!
Jeffrey Combs is a cool guy. You know, he is hot to go. He always has been. Thank you, Seymour, for doing a huge shit just as we started. Thank you.
Well, I feel that him doing a big shit gives this movie exactly the level of respect it deserves.
Hey, I mean, well, look, to be honest, no, wait, hang on. Helen Mahar, welcome to Reanimates.
Thank you.
But, you know, when I was looking at the reviews and the cast and all the various images of this movie, I was like, this is going to be fucking garbage. But it wasn't as bad as I thought, if we're being honest.
Okay, so if we're being honest, I know that you don't like to decry other people's work, but this movie was such a chore, I had to watch it across 2 days.
Oh, look, I didn't have fun. You know, I was like, if I hadn't been taking notes on my phone, I would have been probably scrolling Twitter.
Scrolling on apps, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like enjoyable necessarily, but it wasn't as bad as, A, it wasn't as bad as I expected, and B, it wasn't as bad as a different film by the same writer-director that I've also seen that I have been really putting off covering.
Should we tell your audience what the movie was and what it was about?
No.
You're right. I'm an idiot.
All right, bye. No, well, it's called The Dunwich Horror from 2009, but the credits come up with the other title that was Witches: The Darkest Evil. So I think that maybe they called it that to make it so that it wasn't so explicitly tied to Lovecraft, because this is, when I was looking at the plot of, because obviously this is a Lovecraft story, but when I was looking at the actual plot of the story, it's pretty loosely based.
Yes.
Annoyingly, in the story, the very small role of Jeff's character is actually meant to be the main character.
Yeah.
So I assume the reasoning behind taking some of the smaller characters and making them bigger characters is, I don't know, to get more of that interpersonal romantic relationship that we're meant to care about that's in this as well. I don't.
You don't care about it?
No.
I hadn't read the book before I watched the movie. So right after it finished, I downloaded the book and read it. It's just a novella, so it's not a whole long book. I'd like to think that I have some level of media literacy, but I could not follow 90% of what was going on in this movie and where they were going and what they were doing and why they were doing it.
No, it's very confusing. There's a lot of lore and there's a lot of different characters. There's a lot of names being just chucked around. I was confused a lot of the time too, especially because inevitably with these lower budget movies, the sound is usually shitty.
Okay, so it sounded like they could only afford one boom mic and they put it in the dead center of the room, so they only caught half the sound half of the time. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it was frustrating. I had a similar problem with another low budget movie a couple of weeks ago, but it definitely wasn't the worst element of this film.
Go on.
Well, so, okay. Written and directed by Lee Scott. There's some interesting titles in his directorial and written filmography. Although there is something called, like, there's a horror version of The Little Mermaid, which he did from last year, which I think sounds vaguely interesting. And I watched like a little bit of the trailer, and I was like, okay, I'm potentially interested in that. And then he also did a 2006 called The 9/11 Commission Report, which I guess is about that. As is often the case with low-budget directors, most of his stuff is horror and Christmas.
Again, I'm not an expert, but I think that the reason that low-budget filmmakers or filmmakers who know that they have not much budget available to them, they gravitate towards horror because I think that they think that it's easy to make a horror film and that you can do some jump scares and some loud bangs and a sprinkling of CGI, and then that will equate to a true horror film. When really horror is a lot more in-depth and complex than that. I'm aware that I sound like a wanker right now.
This is a perfect place for you to sound like this here.
But that's what I believe. I mean, any Lovecraft movie, I think, and again, this will sound really wankery, any Lovecraft movie tries to like thread the needle of Lovecraft writing about like the unfathomable thing from beyond that no man can comprehend. So the second that you make a Lovecraft film and you try to commit the unfathomable thing to film, you force the audience to comprehend it, and therefore it's no longer fathomable.
Well, it's also
or it is fathomable.
I guess Lovecraft is a bad choice, I think, for low budget, because you need to be able to create a monster, because obviously, you know, famously there's not super in-depth descriptions of the various monsters and beings and such in his stories. It's like, okay, so why would you set yourself up for such a huge challenge knowing you probably won't be able to meet it?
Yes, knowing that you can't afford it and the technology of the time, it's 2008, can't match it. You're right. I don't know why you would put yourself in that position.
Because this sort of starts as an exorcism film, and that's sort of what you think is going to happen, and then it leads into more about mythology and monsters and stuff like that. And it's like, I mean, if you just wanted to make a horror film with monsters, you could have done that. You didn't need the challenge of trying to film Lovecraft, which is famously very difficult. So we open in Louisiana. The Watley House is one of the main locations. It makes sense later, but the first character we see has the worst, cheapest, shittiest wig I've ever seen.
Oh, it's bright yellow synthetic wig.
Later on, we realize why she has that, but it still didn't, like, it still took me out immediately. Yeah, it's meant to only have been 10 years before the present day, which I guess would mean it was like the fucking late 90s or something, mid 90s. But there's also a lot of like small touches that make it look more old fashioned, like they, you know, the nurses like clean their hands in a bowl and stuff. I don't know.
Everyone's dressed like they're from a Cormac McCarthy novel.
Yeah, it's very dark. I mean, that could just be the American South. I don't know. But it's a very jarring wig. Even with like the context later, it's nasty. She ends up giving birth to twins, the second of which has tentacles. It's all very quick, sort of a messy mix of like shots of like tentacles and a creepy father in a black robe, and then a woman laughing maniacally, and lightning and darkness, and then smash cut. There's a lot of that shitty editing in this. There's a lot of blackout cuts.
Okay, so I thought that either I was imagining it, or I was tired, or the file was corrupt. But about 3/4 of the way through the film, I realized that was just their visual cue to the audience that the person you're looking at is evil.
I guess there's a lot of weird editing around Jeff's character specifically. I don't know why. There's a lot of weird glitchy sort of effects, those weird like sped up glitches that they do sometimes. And then, yeah, just genuine like a second of just like a black screen. Yeah. It's so weird. I don't know if... Because this movie, it has terrible pacing. It cannot rest on anything for more than a second. It doesn't want anything to linger. It's just like bam, 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 get to the next thing. And it doesn't allow anything to just rest and be, which is insane for a movie that has so much fucking talking.
You would think that a director would have lore, explanation, lore, and then perhaps driving quietly for 30 seconds, or two characters glance at each other and they exchange a knowing look. And then lore, exposition, lore, and then another knowing look. But instead it's just from minute 1 to minute whatever it was.
Yeah, it's
constant lore.
So the 10 years later bit is where we have an exorcism. Again, I don't fully know what this was for, because the monsters and stuff that we meet don't seem to possess people. But it's implied that a portal has been opened, and that various monsters are coming through the portal, which I guess also includes demons, which I would have thought are a different thing, because they come up from hell and monsters come from a whole separate place.
But I don't believe you ever see the portal. It's just spoken about.
Yes, it's implied. Okay. It's an implied portal, you know.
I think, just going back for a second, I realize we're jumping all over the place here, much like this movie. Going back for a second to the time period of the movie, I think the only like time context clues were that people are calling each other on Motorola Razors, and
yes.
Also the main female love interest is wearing an extremely 2008 blouse, the one that you bought when you took to your job interview at Baker's Delight. God, you know what else was old-fashioned? The funding at the university that the main guy works at.
Oh my God, it's like a mansion.
He lives in a mansion, and he has an office set up with floor-to-ceiling drapes, an executive desk, and a fireplace. And that's just in his study.
And yeah, he works in like... I'm not even quite clear what he's the professor in. He's like
It's just sort of
mythology
myth stuff, yeah.
All right, so going back to this exorcism, because this scene introduces a couple of characters that we stay with. So we meet Dr. Armitage and his associate Dr. Morgan. Dr. Morgan's played by Sarah Leaving. Armitage is played by Dean Stockwell, who's great. He was a child actor. His first role was in 1945, and he worked pretty much up until a few years before he died, which is, I think he worked until like 2015.
And in the 1970 version of Dunwich Horror, he played the character that Jeff plays in this movie.
He does, yes. And for fans of musical theatre, he was the little kid in the Gene Kelly Frank Sinatra musical Anchors Aweigh.
Which we know is how we get Dibbo's attention.
Well, look, I'm sure there's a huge crossover in Jeffrey Combs horror fans and musical theatre fans. Armitage and Morgan, they tell us that the daughter's bedroom, the daughter who's possessed, was probably some sort of ritual room since the house was built by a practitioner of the occult.
Yes, so he says that. And he says, this house was built by a devil worshipper. And the parents that are sitting on the couch have no reaction to that.
No, I mean, it's very funny because it seems like there's no incredulousness when it comes to, oh yeah, no, she's definitely possessed. Like everyone's just immediately on board with her being possessed. Yeah, it's like, no, she's definitely possessed. That's the problem. You know, it's like when you have pests. It's, oh, you've definitely got ants.
I got a real bad case of Satan here.
Oh, your house is crawling with demons.
Oh, you're going to need to leave the house for 2 to 4 hours and make sure all pets are off the property.
Put a big red and black tent over it. Dr. Morgan alarmingly easily finds a 5,000-year-old, like, pyramid thing in the floorboards. Like it's directly under the floorboards. It was so easy to find. Caitlin, the daughter who is possessed, grows wings and starts climbing the floors. But then we also realize that Dr. Armitage has magical powers.
Yes, so he shoots lightning at her from his fingertips.
Yeah.
Much like Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah. Why? I mean, they say he's a doctor. I have no idea what he's a doctor in.
Myth.
Yeah, he's just got these... And he doesn't have any other magical powers. He just has this lightning.
And it's never explained and again, not that I need every single aspect of every movie explained to me, but I would have liked a crumb of explanation.
I would have preferred explanations on, for instance, why this character had magical powers, more so than I wanted the explanation as to why the two central characters were dating. I don't give a fuck about that. I had so little interest in their romantic bullshit, and it kept on coming up. But we will get to that. So one of the main symbols in this is because Armitage goes to accost Caitlin.
So what's your name?
Caitlin?
Oh. Well, that's a quaint name for a 60,000-year-old alien demon.
Instead of having like a traditional cross, like in a normal sort of Catholic exorcism, he has an ankh. Probably not pronouncing that right, but it's that little Egyptian symbol of life. You would have seen it. I'll put it up anyway. And so that's how he like takes her down. So it's not like a traditional normal Satan exorcism. It's like
And they use the little glowy pyramid as well, right? Don't they?
Yeah, somehow. It's not clear. I don't know. It's like a little Rubik's Cube. They just like put the demon in there. So one of our other main characters is a Professor Rice. He is a professor of mythology. He's talking about the Iron Age. But a lot of the stuff on the board is like Lovecraft monsters and creatures. Professor Armitage ends up bringing Professor Rice in with him and Dr. Morgan, and the three of them are going to try to find the Necronomicon. That's the purpose of the film, basically. So we go to a gas station. There's a couple who are not very good actors, but most importantly, we meet Jeff. Yay!
Yay!
He's in a nearby car watching this couple. She barely talks to the attendant. Like,
he doesn't speak at all.
He doesn't speak at all. Neither of them say hello to each other or like, thank you, here's the money or whatever. She just asks for the bathroom key and he gives it to her. And then Jeff knocks her out and kidnaps her from the bathroom.
And while this is going on, the kidnapping, it intercut with scenes of Jeff kidnapping the woman. is scenes of Rice catching up with his nameless friend.
Yeah.
And they're sitting having coffee, and then exposition is happening.
Yeah.
And that's intercut with Jeff kidnapping the woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, jarring.
That whole scene where Rice is catching up with, and again, I don't think we get a name for that character. He starts talking about a whole other cult.
Henry was going on about a portal or something. He said that all the copies of the Necronomicon are missing page 751. Only the original has that page, so...
And page 751 contains the spells and incantations necessary to open and close said portal.
Precisely. Why do you know that?
Yeah, because basically they need a specific page of the Necronomicon, which apparently is not in any of the copies that have been made throughout history. Apparently it's only in the original.
By the way, next time that we catch up, when I'm talking about something that's important to me personally, I would like you to pull out a briefcase and then from the briefcase extract burned newspaper articles.
Yes.
About a haunted family.
That are somehow related exactly to what I have been worried about. Yeah. And they're from my personal collection. Yeah. So make sure that you take good care of them.
I love that he has them. He just happens to have them on him.
I have to assume they met up
to discuss
it, because there's no reason otherwise. So when we go to the Whatley house, and again, it was slightly confusing as to the relationships of these characters. But so we've got Jeff with his grandpa and then Jeff's mother. Jeff is one of the babies that we saw being given birth to earlier. So the reason that the girl at the start who was giving birth had such a shitty wig is that the character is meant to be an albino. So when we first meet her in this scene, she has sort of like mostly balding and there's a room full of wigs. It was still a shit wig though.
Yeah, and because the movie's so cheaply made, you assumed, as I assumed, that the wig looks bad not because of character reasons and because she's balding. The wig looks bad because the movie looks bad.
Yeah, because it's because, you know, sometimes they're like, no, this character should be blonde. Let's forego having them have their natural hair and put on a very artificial looking wig. Because the wigs especially look cheap in a very modern way. You know, they look like they've been bought off Shein. And I know because that's where I got my wig for Halloween. But yeah, so she's just kind of like crazy. She's just
cackles,
mad, cackling,
giggles,
has that sort of like has like a childlike sort of voice.
Wears a big white nightie.
Yeah, she's dancing around with like a mannequin head.
It's like a very generic crazy.
Yeah, there's like a gramophone playing some sort of like creepy music. It's you know, it's
the house is rickety.
It's
There's no lights on.
Yeah, so it makes sense though when you look at how young everybody is, because the idea that the nameless man in the previous scene states is that this woman who is impregnated by this particular cult... God, it's so fucking confusing.
The woman was impregnated by Yog-Sothoth.
Yes, and then...
God, I can't believe you didn't know that.
I'm sorry. Oh, the Lovecraft cronies are going to come for me. Well, they don't have a leg to stand on. It's very racist.
You're love cancelled.
Oh, no. Okay, so she gives birth to that god's babies. One of them is meant to be like a fairly normal child. The other is meant to be, I believe...
It's just a nameless demonic entity.
So I believe the phrase that the nameless man uses is, one is normal and one is a, quote, inhuman manifestation of the god Yog-Sothoth. There's also the explanation of the idea that the twins age rapidly, which is why the idea of Jeff's character is meant to be that he looks like a 40-year-old with the, quote, intellect of a child.
But even though he's meant to have the intellect of a 10-year-old, but when he goes to the university to look for Rice, he says, and I made sure I wrote this down, he says, Dr. Rice is the curator of the antiquities collection, is he not? Yeah, a normal way of 10-year-olds talking.
He just kind of, like, he has sort of like a, like quite a sallow face. He has like kind of an oddly shaped jaw, kind of like a bit slack-jawed. Like he knows what he's doing. Like he knows that the Necronomicon that he needs, he knows that is held at the University of Arkham.
He knows he's looking for page 751.
He knows that he needs to lie to get it. So the boyfriend from the gas station follows Jeff back to the house with a shotgun, and he finds that they're using his girlfriend in a ritual. That never comes back.
You're right.
Like, we never see...
What comes of her.
We never see what becomes of her. We do see Jeff, he, like, spits this this liquid onto the boyfriend in order to take him down, to make him drop the gun.
And then the boyfriend starts screaming and clutching his eyes and falls to the ground.
And that's it.
Yeah.
We don't see the boyfriend again. We don't know if he's dead. We don't see the girlfriend again. We don't know if she's been like impregnated or anything. They're just chucked in to give those characters like Jeff and his mum and grandpa, just to give them something to do while our dream team is off doing archaeology and hanging out in a harem later. Like, they're just... It's annoying because the more interesting characters are in the background. So they go to see this man who's apparently 3,000 years old. I think his name is Olas.
Yes, and he has the eyebrows of an emperor penguin.
I was going to say a Gen 2.
And he enters the room floating.
Levitating, yep.
Levitating. Levitates to the room and then sits down. And again, the characters have no reaction. They're in a tent full of belly dancing ladies with exotic accents. One of them's just full on naked.
How else would you live if you were 3,000 years old? And
You're so right.
did not know why we had to go to like a Turkish restaurant to visit this guy. But anyway, it was a very, very simple, cheap way of doing like, this is exotic, it's otherworldly.
Oh, they're all olive skinned.
Mm-hmm.
And their tummies are out.
Tummies and titties and mysterious tea. Tea that apparently makes you go crazy.
Yeah, he does give them tea with drugs in it.
He does, yes. He also tells them, so in order to get to the 3,000-year-old man, they had to take a boat just like down a swamp. And the old black blind man who directs them there, he's just like, take a boat, go upstream. And they're like, how far? And he's like, you'll know. Okay.
But they do. They
Yeah.
sail down the river
Yeah.
until they get to the tent with the ladies in it.
Well, the tent is in a shack on the river, which looks pretty cool. I mean, you know, you see that in a lot of horror movies, like shacks on the river in the middle of like a bayou and stuff. And I'm like, no, it sounds pretty fun, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a lot of mosquitoes and snakes and stuff, but, you know,
Oh, but the lore.
might be nice for a holiday. Imagine how many bog witches you'd meet.
You would be a bog witch, Lisa.
It's my natural path in life, I think. One day. Fingers crossed. In this economy.
Actually, I've just realized at this point I must have stopped taking notes. I just wrote I wrote 3630. This is a real chore.
And then you threw your phone away.
I know what happened. I stopped watching for the day and I thought I've got to come back to this another day. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
And then I resumed my notes.
There is a little bit in the interpersonal dynamic between Rice and Morgan. Morgan drops the fact that not only were they together for 6 years, but in that 6 years, he never told her he loved her.
Yes.
Imagine that. That's wild. I wouldn't stand for it.
Yeah, he seems to have like a few hallmarks of his character are that he wears a vest.
A waistcoat.
He wears a waistcoat. Often has wry smiles and knowing looks, and he can't love anyone else.
No, and he doesn't believe in anything, famously.
That's his other big thing, and that comes up a few times, is that she keeps asking him, how can he not believe in the supernatural?
The actor playing Professor Rice, Griff First, I actually didn't mind his performance. I thought that he was quite good at playing like a smarmy dickhead. He also, and it's been driving me crazy since I watched it, he looks so much like someone, like an actor, and I cannot figure out who it is. I think it's like an old Hollywood guy, and it's driving me crazy. So I'm going to post the pictures on the socials, the pictures I've been looking at, and I'm going to try to figure it out.
Yeah, he's kind of got that quote, like all-American look. He did remind me of someone too, and I also couldn't figure out who it was.
I'm going to leave it to digest in my mind palace, and then hopefully it'll come to me in the middle of the night. The scene where Wilbur goes to look for the Necronomicon at the university is very silly, because he walks into this room and Armitage is there. He's expecting Rice, but Armitage is there anyway. And Armitage is like, how are you going to know what you're looking for? Because he hasn't told him that he's looking for the Necronomicon. And he goes, I will know. And he just walks around kind of like vaguely humming.
Feeling his way
putting
around.
his arms up.
Yep.
And it turns out to just be right there on the table.
And not only is it right there on the table, it's illuminated by a beam of light.
Well, you would. I mean, if you've got what you're trying to tell people is the real Necronomicon, you'd obviously leave it right out for people to touch with their greasy hands. Armitage also says that he's a member of like the same cult that Wilbur and his family are in.
Yes.
All right. Does that mean he's evil too?
I think he was just saying that to like gain Jeff's trust. I don't believe that was actually the case. He said, I'm also part of the Brotherhood.
Yes, it could be. It could have been a lie, or it could have been bad screenwriting. For some reason, I'm just going to call her Mother, because we don't, I think, get her name. We have this really hard cut to Mother not killing her father necessarily, but allowing him to be killed by the monster that lives in their house, which I guess is Wilbur's twin.
That happens in the book.
She's just she's just yelling at him about how she can't leave the house. But it's very out of nowhere. It's very sudden. Olas gives them a key to a whole other house to meet a whole other fucking character.
Yes.
Named Ward. There's too many characters, too much lore. I mean, I'm not bad at keeping up with films, but there's a lot of irons in the fire in this movie. A lot of plates spinning.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one, like, reassuring myself that I was, like, not dumb when I was watching it.
You know, I was personally annoyed at myself for allowing this movie to make me feel dumb.
Yeah.
A movie this bad shouldn't have any power over me.
And yet.
Yes. There is a good moment where they say this.
Okay, let's split up. You should take upstairs.
No, we should stay together.
Okay.
Very smart. They do find Ward, who's this very old and very unwell man, whose entire point in the plot seems to be to make a very scary CGI face and then disappear in a puff of smoke. That's all he does.
Yes. Rice reaches out to touch his face.
Which is the thing you would do to a stranger.
Yep.
Yep.
And then, he vanishes. And then Rice says, oh, no, that one I'm going to have a little trouble explaining.
Yeah.
Which is a nod to his cynicism.
Yeah, I do wish overall there are a few little lines here and there where they've made a vague attempt at the idea of humor, but I think when you make a movie that is quite cheap, I think you should try to also make it funny, because you've got to have something to hook people in. Because most of the time, your actors aren't going to be like super amazing, especially at dramatic stuff. The effects aren't going to be really wild. You want to try to cover them up a bit.
So you need something to pull people in.
Yeah, and you also want something to make people care about these characters. So the house not only has a secret third floor, but also an eternal hallway and a man living in the walls.
Yes, and it is the man who wrote the Necronomicon.
And he's still writing it, apparently.
To this day.
Yeah. He lives in, like they open a wall and it's like stone, and he just lives in there now. I'm glad to know that this was another movie with a wall boy, though.
Oh, that's one of your favorite genres.
Oh, look, there's not a huge amount of movies in that genre, but I love it when it comes up.
Love a boy in the walls.
More boys in walls in movies.
Change.org. Start a GoFundMe for Boy in Wool. I've just realized I made a mistake. Rice didn't touch the first guy's face, Ward. He touches this guy's face. So they come across the guy that's scribbling the Necronomicon, and he reaches out to touch his face, and this guy vanishes in a puff of sparkles and smoke.
But yeah, this guy, he tries to touch his face, and the guy turns into sand, I think. Mm-hmm. Something sandy.
And then the room starts rapidly filling with water. And then they realize that they need to break through the stone to get out.
And then there's like a magical land on the other side. A world
on the other side that they look at for a bit, and then they don't mention it again.
Yeah. They're just like, wow, that's weird. And then the room starts filling with water, so they're like, fuck, bigger problems. And then, so again, cutting back and forth between various insane things. Mother starts threatening Jeff with a gun this time. One of the weird blackout cuts is here and affects the plot quite a lot, because she's threatening him with a shotgun, the one that the boyfriend brought. And there's a one of those blackout cuts in the bit where she may or may not have shot him. So I actually have no idea if Mother actually did shoot Jeff or if something else happened, because
or if he just spontaneously dies.
He unfortunately, tentacles come out from inside him and green light shoots out of him and he melts, and then he's a big green melty skeleton on the floor.
And she doesn't really have any reaction.
Well, it happens so often. It's part and parcel, part and parcel with being a Lovecraftian albino that lives
of being the vessel for a timeless, deathless being.
Once you've seen one Lovecraftian death, you've seen them all. Happens all the time in the Louisiana Bayou. A lot of the films Jeff did in this period were in that time of trying new stuff with CGI, the sort of early to mid 2000s.
They were so excited about it.
They were like, oh, think of all the things we can do. It's like, yes, but should you? Shouldn't you just focus on making practical really good, because it always fucking looks better? I will get down off my practical effects soapbox and I will crawl into the innards of this movie again. The main annoying thing is that we now have to spend the next half an hour without Jeff. And his performance, of course it is, but it was very good. It was interesting. He's giving it a lot more gravitas than anyone else is. Once again, he is far and away the best thing in this movie. And now we have to soldier on without him.
Live without him.
R.I.P.
And where we are is Rice and Morgan in the house. and they're escaping water, they're escaping a stone room, and then they escape a floor of lava.
Yeah, there's some sort of fiery pit, and they're freaking out, and then they, she confesses her love to him because they think they're going to die, but then it turns out that it's all an illusion.
It was a dream.
It was sort of a hallucination because they've been in the harem tent the whole time, and they were doped up by the tea.
Yes, they both huffed ayahuasca.
Apparently,
and they've been dreaming the whole time.
Yeah, which is so weird. Like, why would that 3,000-year-old god, why would he make them do that?
To make them realize something? I think maybe it was...
But if they know it's a hallucination, they haven't realized anything because they know it's fake. I'm not trying to get you to explain this movie.
No.
This is all rhetorical.
No. My interpretation was that this was Rice's big moment of his, like, come to Jesus moment, or rather come to the devil moment.
Yeah.
Of realizing that it was true all along. Because he realizes, he has a flashback of them drinking the ayahuasca tea. And then he says, oh my God, it's all a dream. We're still in the tent. And then he says, oh, the house is the book. The house is the book.
Yeah.
And then they race to the walls. They tear apart the world's weakest wallpaper job. And they find with it under the wallpaper the pages of the Necronomicon that they needed all along.
Yes, because he has this... They have this shared vision. They're ripping open the wallpaper. They find the lost pages. And then when he wakes up from the delusion, he writes the shapes down that he has seen. And that's basically all they needed. They didn't even need the whole page.
So they were only accessible within the vision.
Yes, they just, they needed to just be able to see and then write down the shapes needed for some sort of incantation.
Mm-hmm. Which is the incantation that they need to defeat, or to close the portal.
Yes, because a portal has somehow been opened.
The portal that we never see.
The portal that we never see, it's just an implied portal. Armitage kills Mother. He goes to go and see the monster that's in the Watley house, and he tries to shock it with his lightning powers, but the green light continues. This green light that's coming from another room. When we do eventually see the monster, it sucks. I'm sorry.
It does.
I'm sorry, movie, but it would have actually been better to keep it mysterious,
and to have it still be that Lovecraftian, unfathomable thing that no man can comprehend.
Because there's a few times when tentacles come out of the light and touch people and stuff. I'm like, that's interesting because tentacles coming from a room is scary enough. But whenever they do show the monster, it looks pretty bad in a way that is unappealing. That is the difference between CG and practical, is that, sometimes bad practical can still be charming, whereas bad CG just looks really fucking cheap.
And you can appreciate practical.
Yeah.
And there's something about, the way that it interacts with light and casts shadows, and the way that actors interact with it. You can see in this movie that the actor does not know what he's supposed to be looking at.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes where Rice and Morgan especially have to be sort of in the shadow of this immense purple cloud that takes over the Watley house. And the way they're looking up at this thing, this unfathomable thing from the skies, it's like it's a rainstorm that's sort of...
They just look a little concerned.
Yeah, you know how sometimes when it's hailing and you're looking at the hail and you're like, fuck, should I move my car?
That's exactly how they're looking at it.
Yeah, they're like, it does...
This is no good.
It's like, is it going to get worse? Should I move my car into the garage? Are you going to move your car into the garage? No, I think it's going to slow down. Bomb says it's going to slow down in about an hour. I reckon my car will be fine. If the hailstones start to get as big as golf balls, then I'll move it. Otherwise, I think it's just going to rain.
For your American listeners, BOM is Bureau of Meteorology. This is not Lisa saying that bombs are cool.
I would never.
Yes, so Yog-Sothoth is a deathless, eternal god who exists outside all of time, and he's forever locked out of our reality in a blasphemous outer sphere. And in this movie, he's a green octopus with a human face who comes out of a purple cloud.
Yes. I wonder why purple is so often used as a Lovecraftian color. I feel like most Lovecraft movies have sort of purple as I don't know if it's just often a tinge, or if there's just when things happen, they often are purple.
I think it's probably the same nonsense logic of why in so many early to mid 2000s movies is there a blue beam of light.
Everything's so blue in those movies.
There just is.
Oh my God.
For those movies, a blue beam of light is the way that they communicated sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that this is a purple mist is just the way that they communicate horror fantasy.
Okay, so blue is futuristic, purple is otherworldly, green is wicked. Yeah, and then if it's red, it's
Sexy.
sexy, Satan, blood. And if it's brown, you're trapped in a poo world. I apologize.
We're in our 30s.
No, doesn't matter. So for some reason, Rice and Morgan decide to take Caitlin, who appears from nowhere,
That's right.
on this journey. Caitlin is the girl who was possessed at the very
beginning.
start.
Which I had no idea until she mentioned that she had wings coming out of her back at one point.
Does she just live at the university now? She's completely back to normal, by the way. I have no idea how long in the past previously the exorcism was.
Yep.
She's fine now. She's also very happy to come along, and they want her to come along because she is part of some sort of family lineage that is connected to the old world. Here's her summation of her own possession. It's very glib.
I've seen things that I can't explain. I've experienced things far outside the realm of normal, and if any of it is true, or even if it's partly true, what we're about to experience is not for the squeamish.
Dr. Rice, I was possessed. Now, I don't remember much of it, but from what they told me, I had bat wings growing out of my back. So I'm down.
She's pretty cool with it. There's no lasting trauma or even concern really for the long-term effects of being possessed by an otherworldly monster.
But they don't state why they need her to come along. She convinces Rice with her glib explanation of the horrific thing that happened to her at the beginning of the movie. And then Rice says, all right, but I've got shotgun, like a special boy. And then they're driving.
They do throw in something about there needing to be a family, like something to do with a lineage in terms of the rituals. But there's a whole lot of family names that are apparently all linked with these various cults. Too many plates spinning. So the monster comes out of the big purple cloud, takes Armitage straight away. He's gone. Bye, Dean Stockwell. Which sucks, because, again, now we're left with the lovebirds.
And the cool girl.
And the cool girl. So,
She's not like other girls. She was possessed, but no big thing.
I actually like being possessed. I just feel like it brings me closer to my guy friends.
I just really like the tentacles inside. No.
It's a different kind of girl, I think, yeah. Oh, I was possessed. Ooh.
I like hanging out with demons because they're not as dramatic as girls.
They're just chill, Does Caitlin call Dr. Armitage Dad in this scene?
Dad!
Again, the sound wasn't great, so it could have been. But I don't know. I don't know what else she was. I don't know what else she was yelling. But
Maybe just dad.
dead. Oh no, dead.
You know that thing that you do at funerals? You walk into the funeral, you sit down, you go, Dad.
I think you just point out people who are dead and alive, just to tick it off in your mind. You just point at people, dead, alive, dead. So they start doing some incantations. The monster starts pulling Megan in too, but of course Rice saves her.
Lisa, please use his real name, Yog-Sothoth.
I apologize.
This is Yog-Sothoth Erasure.
There's too many gods. I apologize, Yog-Sothoth. Please don't smite me.
Yog-Sothoth.
Yog-Sothoth. Fucking stupid name. I'm glad H.P. Lovecraft is dead. Clearly being a huge racist wasn't the worst thing about him.
He would email you to tell you that this was old god Erasure.
No, he would write me a long letter.
Oh,
Even if he had email, he would still write me a letter.
with a quill.
Yeah, he'd be like, I just like old-fashioned things. Like old-fashioned racism. Yeah, he'd be one of those guys who does vintage dress sort of stuff, but he does it in a way where he's like, I wish we lived in the 1940s so I could be really racist.
Yeah, those guys, at first you're like, he's got a really sharp sense of style and his hair is always perfectly coiffed. And then you make the mistake of inviting him to your party and then he says things that makes other guests uncomfortable.
Yeah. I just like the old-fashioned ways that men and women used to interact.
Bring it back.
Bring good old-fashioned chauvinism back. The good old days when women would just be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen.
Ugh, it all got worse when we allowed women into the workforce.
Oh, back in the good old days when I could smoke on an aeroplane and fuck my secretary and drink at lunchtime. I wish I lived in Mad Men. Luckily, the little sayings that they do, the various incantations, they work and the cloud goes away.
Not only does it works in under 30 seconds. They say the incantations and he goes, and then he vanishes and it's all fine.
What does he go? Yeah, spot on. Yeah, that is the sound of the unfathomable, unnameable monster
Unknowable,
disappearing.
timeless god that's trapped in a outer sphere beyond our comprehension. He goes,
Yep, and then just goes no, and then disappears back into whatever his universe is. Surprisingly easy to take over. And then we're back to normal.
Rice and Morgan have a little flirty exchange at the end, and it's all a bit of fun. And then he's back to teaching in his completely full lecturing hall, which, again, is not an accurate depiction of university. And then at the very end, the student that he hates, Bryce,
Yeah.
the most enthusiastic and engaged student, for some reason, Rice hates how enthusiastic and engaged he is. He raises his hand and he asks Dr. Rice, he says something like, "Do you believe in the supernatural?
Yeah.
Or have you ever seen anything supernatural?"
Well, yeah, because Rice starts talking about faith, and Bryce asks him if he has faith.
And Rice says, "Yes, I do." Credits.
Yeah. And you know that he's a changed man because not only is he wearing jeans to his workplace, but he's sitting on the table like a cool guy.
Oh, the cool prof.
Yeah. He's like, hey kids, let's rap. Hey kids, let's rap about Yog-Sothoth. Hey, I've been around the block. I've seen the unnameable Lovecraftian monsters. I know a thing or two.
Because after all, it's 2008, so yes, we can.
Hey guys, go out there and be your best, because you never know when a tentacled monster will come out of another portal and eat your face.
Something we would all do well to remember.
Hey, you never know. There could be one around any corner. There could be one inside my cat right now, and we would have no idea. I mean, that's not far away from the noise he often makes from day to day.
Well, Lisa, what did you learn from this movie, if anything?
I learned that I don't really feel the need to read Lovecraft. The Lovecraft I have read has been fine. Like, I'm not a fan or anything. And I think that most film interpretations of Lovecraft set themselves up to such a challenge that maybe sometimes it's not really worth doing it. I appreciate any attempt at art. I would never decry a low budget for the fact in and of itself of being low budget, because you can do things with no money. This film's worst sins are the things that it does that actually overcomplicate it. In this, like, trying to do these weird glitches and cuts that actually make it harder and less pleasant to watch when you could have just left a scene going, trusting in your actors to make the scene interesting, or just little stylistic choices. There are things that you can do. You don't have to rely necessarily on how much money you have in any given scenario. Like, there are always things you can do to make a film more interesting. Think of all the films that were made on fucking nothing, which look great now. You're making a movie. Why wouldn't you just do it as well as you possibly can? And my only real explanation for why this movie isn't like that is maybe there's just not enough imagination in it.
But at the same time, too much ambition.
Yes, those are different things, because you can have ambition without necessarily having, like, the creative backbone to it.
Well, yeah, so I think both things are happening at the same time. They were way too ambitious, but they also weren't imaginative. So they were too ambitious with what they were trying to accomplish, but they didn't actually have the creativity or the restraint to pull it off.
Yeah, there was just so many things that were just
Superfluous.
Well, look. Did you learn anything? Did you come away with any lessons, good or bad, from this film?
It made me realize how stupid we all looked in 2008.
Oh, please send me some photos of you from 2008, because...
Oh, happily.
Yes.
Happily. I guess I learned from this movie that actually doing drugs that someone gives you is a good idea, because it will make you realize the secret knowledge that you've been looking for all along. And then you're able to use that to defeat your enemies. So I guess the through line that you could draw there is drugs, the answer.
So take drugs and do crime.
They didn't do crime. They defeated the evil with the knowledge that they gained from doing the ayahuasca.
Crimes against monsters. Look, it was fine. If I was, when I do log it on Letterboxd, it'll probably be 2.5.
What?
Well, 2 seems mean. Not mean. 2 seems... Because, that's the thing. I wish they did quarter and 3/4 stars on Letterboxd. Because sometimes it's not 2, but it's not 2.5. 2.5 is sort of my go-to for, like, it's fine.
Okay.
Because there is some good elements. There's a couple of good performances.
You're a much more forgiving person than I am. I've always thought that. And this has been made especially stark to me just now.
The famously benevolent Dibbo.
In that you would give this 2.5 stars. I mean, I don't use Letterboxd, so I don't know how the rating system works, but I use Uber, and I would give this a 1 star if it were my driver.
Okay. When I do my stars, I don't necessarily base it on just objectively how the movie is. I also use it for like how I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Because there are some times when a movie can be like kind of crappy, but I had such a good time, goes up to 4 stars. I think, look, yeah, if I could do like 2.25 stars, I think I would do if I could.
A cheeky quarter.
Cheeky quarter, yeah, because Jeff is good when he's in it. Dean Stockwell's pretty good for what he's been given. The main guy, Griff, he had something about him that was kind of interesting. And the Sarah, I think the main actress, she wasn't too bad either. Again, everyone's fine.
Yeah. I see what you mean. I guess fine is not enough for me personally. I need more.
Having done this podcast, fine is a blessing sometimes. What was that TikTok you did the other day that was like people who have really like blue eyes or something trying to make it their whole...
It was young people on TikTok who think that they're so visually arresting that all they need to do is stare into the camera while like a hip-hop track plays.
Yeah, but all it really is they're wearing like bright blue contacts or something. Well, that's what Seymour does. I think he's like... He keeps on looking like wide-eyed at me, like, look how green my eyes are. Aren't they amazing? People say they change color in the sun.
God, I can't wait to get his take on the latest discourse.
I don't think Seymour's ever had a take in his life.
But he'll take and take and take from you. Of
course, I have nothing to do but give for him.
All right, this is no longer Jeff-related.
No, this podcast is not a stranger to going off tangents down a primrose path of something else.
Because your guest just wants to talk about anything else.
Yeah, because we're sort of delaying the inevitable of having to finish talking about the movie. All right, Helen, anything to plug?
All that I have is my Instagram account, which is Halloween Queen Helen.
Mm-hmm.
And on there, I scour the internet for anything that's happening around Victoria that's vaguely related to Halloween or horror or alternative culture or anything just generally weird or off-center. So I post all those events on that Instagram so that people can get together at those events and build a horror community.
Yes, and that is Victoria, Australia, because even though you are clearly American, you do live in Melbourne, Australia.
Yes, I do.
Yes, no, that's good. There's always lots of, well, not just spooky stuff necessarily, but also just like, cultural, like film stuff.
Totally. Yeah. There's movie clubs. There's horror-themed markets. There's horror meetups where we just get together, talk about horror movies. There's all kinds of stuff. Melbourne's great for that kind of stuff. There's a lot of creatives and independents and small businesses.
Pretty good town. I like it. It's where I live.
What? Where am I?
Oh, no. I'm going to have to leave.
Now that the people know.
Oh, no. My many fans will be knocking down my door. No, get away. I only have so much of me to give.